being this, and I don't even know if it's in my notes or not, but it turns out millennial people, America has been in love with what we call mega churches for a long time. And it turns out the millennial generation is not impressed at all. They don't care about things being big. They don't care about things being fancy. What they are looking for is things being real, and they're looking for intimacy. They want to be in a setting where you know, we used to have a TV show, I don't know if it ever got to Britain, called Cheers. And the theme song was, wouldn't you want to go to a place where everybody, you know what it says? Everybody knows your name. And yet we go to churches that have 5 services on a weekend, and there's 5,000 people at each church, and you could die and nobody would even know. And so when we start looking at small churches, a lot of times, and this is more true in America than it is here, people are embarrassed that they pastor a church that's under 100 people. And they're more embarrassed if they have a job that pays money, that pays for their family, and then the church doesn't have to pay them so much for their money. In America, we call that bivocational, and that's looked down on. That means that you're a loser. You didn't get to be 5,000 people, something's wrong with you. And a lot of those guys end up quitting the ministry. And we think that's completely backwards. And so today we're going to talk about that as we progress through the day. But I just want to go really quickly through some things that are good about small churches. And the first thing that I always tell everybody is, learn to love your church while it's small. If you don't love it while it's small, your people are always going to feel that something's wrong with them. That we don't quite measure up, or we'd be as big as those guys down the street. And our pastor is a little bit mad at us because whatever we're doing, we're not doing it right. We need to learn to love it while it's small. Zechariah chapter 4, verse 6, one of my favorite places in the Bible, says, "This is," and I love this, "the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel." Zerubbabel was trying to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, and he was having a hard time doing it. And he had these expectations for what was going to happen, but only these things happened. So our big problem is our expectations. If our expectations are too small, we won't get much done. If our expectations are too tall, we're just going to get discouraged, and we're not going to accomplish what we could. But here's the word of the Lord. It's not by might, which is human might. It's not by power, which is human power. But it's by my Spirit, says the Lord of hosts. I grew up in the Foursquare church. I was born the year Amy Semple McPherson died. Her son was the president of the denomination. I bet you Sreka doesn't even know this. The denomination almost split in two when she died. A bunch of churches in the Midwest part of the United States broke away and started their own district, or their own denomination. And then in California, there were 2 pastors who were very loved by the denomination. And so everybody was divided. Do we want Dr. Jeffries or do we want Dr. Courtney to be the pastor, the president of Foursquare? And it was starting to be hostile. And so Dr. Jeffries and Dr. Courtney got in a back room and decided, well, let's just go tomorrow and tell everybody neither one of us is going to be president, and we think Amy's son Rolf should be the president. So they made him the president for life. And we came on the scene, so I was born when she died, so I go to Bible college. It's 19 years after she died. And her son Rolf has got the personality of a chair. I mean, but he's the president. And he's very careful with money, which we didn't appreciate because we thought, you know, you're too tight, we should spend money. Now we have leaders who spend money, a lot of it, and we go, we need Rolf again, you know. So when I got there, I grew up seeing pictures. The church I grew up in was the largest Foursquare church in America. It had 1,300 people. Today, they wouldn't even call that a mega church. It was the largest church of any kind in the state of Oregon. And so I went there. In those days, we had hymn books. And they had pictures of Angelus Temple when Amy was there, but they didn't say it's when Amy was there. And there's like 6,000 people in this auditorium. There's a photograph of it. And then they had a photograph of 2 or 3 other big churches, and there's a photograph of my church. Out of, 600 churches, my church is in the book. Every Sunday morning. We're cool. We're in the book, So I go to Bible college, and it's at the Angelus Temple. And when you're a first-year student, you have to work in the Sunday school of Angelus Temple. That's just the rule. I go there, and I find out this room that'll hold 6,000 people, there's 400 people in church. Now, none of you pastor more than 100. 400 is a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's huge. The average church in the United States comes out to 124 people. 3 weeks ago, I believe that was 75. But I found some real good data. It's 124 people. So a church of 400 is 3 times the national average. That's a lot of people. But when you go to church in a room that will hold 6,000, it's terrible. It's just awful. And so I get there, and it's just, everybody's depressed. The leadership is feeling like losers. It was just a terrible time. And then this thing happened that we called the Jesus movement. Drugs had happened in America. We had this satanic music group that came and brought this foreign music to our country, and we just did not know what to do with the Fab Four.
Sorry about that.
I mean, but you have to understand, we went from bubblegum music to the Beatles, and the Christian church is like, oh, that's of the devil, all that's going on. My sister is going to, the hippies had what they called love-ins, and they go and smoke dope and play music, and have sex on the grass in the park. That was what was happening. My sister came to Bible college. She was going to the love-ins, running around with a 4 spiritual laws tract, trying to tell people about Jesus. And she quit going because one day she saw this man jump on another guy and start to try to choke him to death in the park. Well, what it turned out was he had heroin in a condom. And when the cops caught him, he swallowed the condom. And it was an undercover cop trying to choke him to keep him from swallowing the evidence. And me, growing up in church, it's like I want nothing to do with any of that. And one day, we got this little tiny church building. It's Foursquare. We inherit it. There's nobody there. So we're down, my wife and I, and we're cleaning the church, getting ready we're going to open in a couple months. I was a youth pastor, and I had to stay with the kids through summer so I could go to the camps. Then we're going to start this church. And this hippie comes into our church. And now, I wear a suit and tie to church. And in those days, I had a haircut much shorter than this one, because that's what you had to have. This would be considered, I'm trying to look like the Beatles. So, but you know what? Soreka's pastor was wearing Beatle boots and listening to Beatles music the whole time. He has told me that. So anyhow, this guy comes in. He's living on the road. Now today we would talk about homeless people. In the hippie days, the people, they wanted to be homeless. They buy an old bus and live in the bus, or they just hitchhike wherever they were going. And in California, the weather's nice. They'd sleep under a bridge someplace. And so this guy's hair is greasy, just filthy, and he smells horrible. And he comes in and he wants money, and all I had was $5, and we were pretty broke. And $5 that many years ago is almost like $50 today. So think 40 pounds. And it's at a time when my rent is like $200 and some a month. So it's a significant amount of money. And so that's all I had. I gave it to him. And we prayed without knowing what we were asking. Lord, we pray that people like that will come to this church. Now what we meant was that there would be maybe 60 or 80, because I thought I'd never had a youth group over 30, so if we could fill a building with 66 people, or 66 chairs, if we could fill a building with 66 people, I was going to think I'm a success. And so we're praying, and so we think we want 64 real people and 2 of them. So Lord, let people like that come to our church. Well, 2 weeks into the church, there's one pretty normal girl named Tony Corbett, who her friends were hippies, and they found the Lord, and they quit smoking dope and started to try to go to church. They went to a Baptist church, and the guy who met them at the door was the deacon, and he said, if you'll shave and get a decent haircut and not wear blue jeans, you can come back to church. Otherwise, you're not welcome here. So they went back to the garage where they used to hang out and smoke dope, and started holding Bible studies. And we were all too stupid in those days. They started a church. And if somebody would have had half a brain, like me, they would have said, you're the pastor, here's how you do it, I'll coach you, and let them be a church. But we weren't that smart. So pretty soon they were reading the Bible together every Sunday, and then they're reading the Bible and smoking dope together every Sunday, and then they're smoking dope together every Sunday, and that's the end of that. And then Tony, who they had witnessed to in their Christian days, comes to our church, and we led her to the Lord first week. And second week, she brings all these hippies to our church. So now it's like, we got one guy in a suit, and nothing but a bunch of hippies. And 3 weeks in, it was hippies, bikers, and a topless dancer named Kitten. And me in a suit and tie. And I mean, but this thing broke out across America. And thousands of people got saved. I've watched people just walk up to a biker, like, motorcycle gang kind of guy, and go, are you interested in Jesus Christ? And in 10 minutes, he accepts the Lord, and he's crying tears. Once we were out passing out Bibles in front of a bar. I had junior high school kids, 11, 12, 13 years old. I watched a little girl go up to a man and try to give him a Bible, and you would have thought she had a gun, because here's what he did. And he went into the bar. He was afraid of that Bible. It was crazy. And people just were getting saved all over the place. And then all of a sudden it came to an end. And you knew that revival was over. And how we really knew it was a revival is it all changed when it was over with. And so as I look at all this, I can look at a time in my life where I was different, church was different, we were more involved with this than we were with this. I think you have to do both. I don't think you can just trust the Holy Spirit and do nothing, but I think that it's the power of God that we need to be praying for. But the main message here, and I keep getting off telling stories, is that what it says here, do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. And I think if you're pastoring a church, how many are pastoring more than 50 people in your church on average attendance? 1, 2, 3, 4, actually 2 couples, right? I think that's good. I think the problem isn't that your church is too small. The problem is we need more of them. And your church needs to learn to have babies. And if we can have every church have babies, then we're going to get something done, really. Okay, so here's the deal. Did you know? You can't see my slide till I'm ready. Did you know that God loves Chinese people more than any of you? Are there any Chinese people in this room? Or any part Chinese people in this room? You lose. Do you know how I know God loves Chinese people more than He loves the rest of us? Because He made more of them. Okay, you laugh. I know a lot of Chinese people. I won't go there. Chinese people are really good at making money, and they're really good at starting churches. I mean, I'm not kidding you. if we could all do what the Chinese are doing. And I was in a room, I was in Shanghai in March. And I was at this conference, and you know, we've all heard the story of the Chinese church, how it grew underground and persecution and all that. Well, now you go to house churches in China. They're called house churches, they're illegal. And they're usually it's built on some company property. I met a guy who, when he was 14 years old, was an orphan. And he would go with a fishing pole, not a net, and catch fish in the morning and sell them on the sidewalk in the afternoon. And that's how he supported himself. Today he's a multi-millionaire, driving the longest Mercedes you ever saw in your life. And he is embarrassed because he never went to college. He owns a multinational electronics company, and he learned to get that way by going to, they have public libraries in China. He went to the library and read business books. And then he became a Christian, and he read the Bible, and he read the book of Acts, and he's so embarrassed. I mean, the guy you want to just slap him and go, hey, wake up, man, and get real. He's so embarrassed because he didn't go to seminary. And I did. I went to 2. And he's pastoring over twice as many people as I ever pastored in my life. But because he owns this company, he can build a big church building. It's all marble. The outside is all marble. On company land, and the government leaves him alone. So that's what's going on in China. So I'm there, and here's what I found out. Those guys are not interested in what I have to say. And what I have to say is all about what used to happen when people used to go to jail for their faith. Could we do the same thing without going to jail? In other words, could we say, I'm going to pastor a small church that reproduces itself over and over and over again, because that's how China, almost 10% of the people in China are now Christians. And here's the good news, depending on where you sit. The government is now cracking down on churches. I was with 17 pastors, and the smallest of those churches was 4,000 people. The largest is about 8,000. And all of them are, quote, underground churches that the government doesn't know about. And I saw a picture last year. The government is forcing people to take crosses off buildings. And one church refused to do it, and there's a wrecking ball smashing the building. And if you took a church of 4,000 people and you destroy the building, and you say you can't meet together anymore, the government just started at least 300 churches, because people instantly are going to go underground. And so when you look at this thing, and I say that God loves the Chinese people, well, maybe one of the reasons He loves them is they're really good at planting churches, and He do it everywhere in the world that they go. But here's this. There are more small churches in America than large churches. Churches with 150 people or fewer, there's 300,000 of those. They represent 75% of all churches. So 75% of all churches are under 150 people. Churches with 75 people or less, there's 200,000 of those. That's 50% of all churches. Churches with 45 people or fewer, there's 100,000 of those. 25% of all the churches in America are that. So if you add this whole thing together, and you start to think about the church of less than 150 or 75% of the churches, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And what's carrying the load in terms of the culture having some Christian influence is small churches. It's not the big churches. This is the first time I taught these slides, and I have more data in a book I'm writing, so I'm not sure that I have all of it. But, the Bible says this, that the kingdom of heaven is like a tiny mustard seed that a man planted in the garden. It grows and it becomes a tree, and the birds of the air launch in its branches. Here's what I think this scripture means. I think that the kingdom of heaven, when it's planted small. But when it grows, and if you think about it, a tree of any kind grows with many branches. and it has many fruit that bear the seeds of many more, rather than one big tree with one big fruit. It's like this. If you had to feed an army, and you had to choose between feeding your army elephants to eat or feeding your army on rabbits, which would you choose? Elephants are bigger, but it takes 13 months for one elephant to be born. Rabbits are smaller, but a rabbit from birth to 5 weeks will give birth to another rabbit. You would definitely feed off of rabbits. So if we're going to try to build churches, do we want to build elephant churches or do we want to build rabbit churches? We want to build rabbit churches if we believe that the gospel is supposed to fill the earth. And I believe that the gospel is supposed to fill the earth. And when it says this, that the birds make nests in its branches, well, here's what I think that Jesus is trying to say to us, is the culture is going to learn to be somewhat righteous because of the values of the kingdom of God. In America, American people like to say that America was founded by Christians. And I've actually I like to read history. The guys who signed the Declaration of Independence, some of them actually were pastors. But most of them were not Christians. They were what Americans call deists. That means they believe there's a God up there, but they don't necessarily believe that Jesus was his son. But here's what we do know about them. All of them knew the Bible. They were taught the Bible in school. It's called the New England Primer. The textbook that they used in all public schools was scriptures. And so these people who, many of them never did believe in Jesus, grew up memorizing scripture. They learned about honesty. They learned about righteousness. They learned about, social values. The birds of the air were nesting in the branches of the church, even if they didn't get saved. We own the culture. Am I making sense? Okay, I got some data here.
John used to shout at me.
Okay, you need to write some of this down, or it won't mean much to you. I'm just going to read part of another book I'm writing that you can get on exponential.com in about October for free. Okay, assume an average congregation size of 124. We know that's true in America. From the years 2000 to 2005. Oh, so it's up there, that's good. Okay, from the years 2000 to 2005, America, to keep up with population, needed to start 3,205 churches a year that lived. Okay, you just start a bunch, some are going to die, but you need to be left with 3,205 new churches every year. That's to keep up with population growth. We got 303. That's horrible. We fell short by more than 17,000 church plants in a 5-year period of time. From 2000 to 2005, we fell short by 17,000 church plants. That becomes astounding, and it almost seems impossible. That's a deficit of 2,902 churches every year that we didn't grow. We've got to figure out a different way to do this. The current shrinkage by percentage. Now here's the thing, and these numbers I'm going to give you aren't quite accurate. The numbers are like from 1997 to 2004. But and here's what they found. I remember this part accurately. Some of it, it's the first time I ever taught this, so I don't have it all down accurate. But I remember the 52 million. In 1997, there are 52 million Christians in the United States. And when I say Christians, what I mean is liberal Christians, Pentecostal Christians, evangelical Christians. But they answered a question by the Gallup poll that said, have you been to church or synagogue in the last 7 days? And 52 million people said that. Okay, 1997. I'm quite sure it's 2004. 2004, they asked the same question. They asked thousands of people this so they could get the thing. Exactly 52 million people said, yes, I've been to church or synagogue in the last 7 days. Now here's the deal, and I think this is why they chose the particular years. In that period of time, guess how many people the population of America grew by? 52 million.
Wow.
So in a 7 or 8 year period of time, the population grew by as many Christians as there are, but the church didn't grow at all. And so we are now we're growing a little bit. The church is growing, but we're still losing ground percentage-wise. Currently, the best data that we can get, and I've got, if you get the book, it's got really good research. In fact, I'm driving the exponential people nuts because I really get into data, and they want a simple book, and I got tons of footnotes. But I ran across some really good research places, and some Christian poll takers say that 40% of all Americans go to church every Sunday. And if you live in America, you know that's not true at all. Okay? All you got to do is drive down the freeway on Sunday morning on your way to church. I live 25 miles from where I pastor, and every Sunday I can tell you that 40% of the population is not on the highway. And when I was back in California as a youth pastor, we would always go out to lunch after church, and people wore suits and ties. But you could always spot the pastor because he's always in the booth in the restaurant. You guys don't have booths in restaurants, but we do. And the pastor's always like this, and he's got a crowd of people around him, and he's kind of fat. And you know, you can't drink, you can't dance, you can't smoke, and go to movies, so you eat. So anyway. You can go to a restaurant on Sunday and you know those people haven't been to church. So here's the real data. The real data says that currently 23% of the people in America can say, I went to church in the last 7 days. Now, they're telling us that that number is going to be 17% by 2020. That's only 3 years from now. That number is going to be 11% by 2050. I'll be dead then, you'll still be alive. You with me so far? So the church is actually growing now a little bit, but percentage-wise, the population is growing way faster, so we're losing. Now stop and think about this. And I know you probably, because what you read in the news, don't like him very well, and I'm not sure if I like him either. His name is Donald Trump. Okay? Here's the stuff that we know about the news. Barack Obama, 5 years ago, was in a meeting with Vladimir Putin. And he had left his microphone on. He had a pin on a microphone. And this made news in America. And he didn't know the microphone was on. And he tells Putin, you know what? Things are going to be really different between us because I just got elected for 4 more years and I can't run again after that. I have freedom to do what I really want to do. Now, what did he really want to do? I don't know, but whatever he really wanted to do, it was supposed to make Putin happy. And that doesn't necessarily sound very good for an American president to say that. So it was all over the news. CNN made a big deal out of it. But then it came out this week in the news that in the, whatever that Group 20 thing was that Theresa May was at, G20, that he had an official meeting with Putin. Then Trump also had another meeting with Putin for 12 minutes, and nobody knows what they talked about. Now, you tell me that Theresa May didn't have meetings with somebody from other countries over a cup of coffee or something private. That's how government is done. CNN, there's people who track this because they're mad. CNN spent 4 times as many minutes, and we're talking like hours and hours, talking about that Trump met with Putin and nobody knows what they talked about. They spent 4 times as much talking about that as they did. Obama met with Putin and said, boy, you're going to like what I'm going to do. Now, I mean, give me a break. They just don't like Putin, and they're telling the whole world, or Trump, they're telling the whole world not to like Trump. Well, I think Trump's a liar. I think there's a lot of bad things about Trump. But here's one thing I know. We have a guy named Neil Gorsuch who got appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States, and most laws in the United States are written by the courts. And because Gorsuch is on the court, now it's leaning against abortion, it's leaning for human rights, it's the court, the stuff that Trump is doing in terms of immigration, some of it is dead wrong. The court is going to correct that. If Hillary Clinton got elected, Neil Gorsuch wouldn't be on the Supreme Court. Some liberal person would be on the Supreme Court. Christians in America lost freedoms under Barack Obama. Serious things happened under Barack Obama. Trump only got elected because the biggest block of voters in the Republican Party are evangelical Christians. So we now have 23% of the population, and you cut that down to 17%, and Donald Trump wouldn't have been elected because he barely got elected. And I don't really care about Donald Trump. I do care about the Supreme Court, who's running my life. And so when the birds of the air are still in the branches of the tree, because our values are represented in that court, if we don't start starting churches, we're going to lose all that. Am I making sense? Yeah. Okay, so now let's go back to my notes. Let's see if I can make this. I'm taking a lot of time, and I need to get going on this. So here's some good things. You should write some of this down. Here's some good things about small churches. Small churches are more adaptable than large churches. Okay? We meet in a movie theater. We are terrified that they're going to decide to remodel the movie theater and we won't have any place to go because we got to have a room that can handle 200 and some people. They just had an air conditioner break in one of the theaters. We rent 5 theaters. The biggest one, the air conditioner broke, so we had to jam into the small one, which we were able to do, but if we were any bigger, we wouldn't be able to do that. And so we're still small enough to be fairly adaptable, but if we had 500 people, we could not do that. We heard of another church that meets in the movie theater. They have about 2,000 people. They're in the same town I used to pastor in. We had about 2,000 people. We owned a building. They meet in a movie theater. They shut the theater down for 8 months to remodel the theater, and so these people had to move to a public school or something, and they're just having all kinds of trouble. So small churches can adapt very quickly. You can communicate to key leaders with a few texts or a few phone calls. It's very easy to communicate. This is a good thing. The bigger the church, the more distant the pastor is from the people. It's hard. I've been there, I don't like it. There's a guy named Andre Crouch. Does anybody know the name Andre Crouch and the Disciples?
Yeah.
Andre was an African American. I thought he was a failure. We went to college together, and the guy went and quit Bible college. And I knew if you didn't go to Bible college, you can't be in the ministry. And he went on and influenced millions of people with his music. If you're old enough to remember, Johnny Carson was the big talk show in the United States. They had Andre Crouch on there singing Christian songs about Jesus on Andre Crouch after the guy did the stupid thing of leaving Life Bible College behind. But in the middle of all that, I'm pastoring 75 people, and Andre comes to our town to do this big event. Like 10,000 people are going to go see him in Anaheim, California. But the guy who arranged it was my friend. He lived in the same town I did. He went to a Baptist church. But he came to me and he said, "Would you like to have Andre sing in your church?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "I mean, tonight. This is a Wednesday." And we had a small Wednesday night service. And I go, "Oh, yeah, we'd love to have Andre." So we just get on the phone. We made a few phone calls. And our church at that time had like 50 people coming. 175 people showed up to fit in a building that would hold 66. But see, because we were small, we could adapt quickly, and we could do that. And you know, the moral of the story: it's easier to turn a rowboat than an aircraft carrier. You know, you can do things in a small church you can't do in a large. So there's a strong congregational identity, and it isn't necessarily built around a name. And you know, I don't know about in England, but in America, we're big on church names. But people generally know the history of their church. They can tell everybody the story from the beginning to the end. In my church, we're constantly trying to teach them the history so they'll have some sense of credibility of the church. The members better understand the basic vision, values, and goals of the church. Again, I have to have a Sunday a year where I go over all these things to remind everybody. In a small church, it's just kind of natural. Everybody does that. Traditions are more important to the hearts of the members. We have a thing called mini church. It's just, we break up in small groups every week, and we only start them by, if you're leading one, you raise up a disciple, and you go and you start another one, and that's how we do this. And we're very dyed in the wool about this. The thing is a little bit like the table talk we did last night. I preach on Sunday, they go to mini church, and we ask these questions. First we ask them this, and everybody just goes around the ring. It's like, I'll start. So last Sunday, I talked about, I'm going to make this up because it's really hard. How many of you can remember what you preached on last Sunday? I cannot. So I'm going to say, Joshua, Jericho, and faith. What do you remember? And then what do you remember? And so we just go like that. It takes 3 minutes. But all we're doing is getting everybody to get up out of the filing cabinet. Because we do this, our people take notes. And when I put notes in the church bulletin, but I don't put details and I don't put scriptures. I just put the 3 headings or the 5 headings. And they come. Instantly we ask that question, the notes come flying out, and but that means that they took notes in church, which is a good thing. So then we go around the room and we go, what did the Holy Spirit say to you? That's question number 1. You should be writing this down. Second question is, what are you going to do about it? Because there needs to be accountability. And the third question is, how can we pray for you and how can we help you? Both. We want to pray for you, but if you need money or if you need help, whatever it is, we want to be there. And that's the whole night. We eat food together, and then that's the whole deal. And you'd be amazed. One of the things we're going through with our new pastor is he would like to ask more intellectual questions, more about what did the teaching say and all that kind of stuff. And I had to kind of correct him and go, you ask those kind of questions, people don't put their life on display. You ask these questions, people put their life out there for other people to assess their life. So what's happened is, I said that the traditions are more important to the hearts of the members. Well, these people exported that to Kenya. And that's why I'm not ever going to go to Kenya, because if I go down there, people are going to say, you know what Ralph Moore did in Kenya? Well, no, I did it in Honolulu. They did it in Kenya. And now this guy Samuel is doing it in Kenya. And it's easy to pass on, but they get it. They understand it. They live and they breathe it. And then loyalty is just a natural thing. Either they like you or they don't like you. One of the things that I would recommend you do in a small church is either have a Facebook page or have a web page. And put, these are the things we value, this is what we do. If you can, put your sermons on there. And here's the reason why. People can spy on you. And when they spy on you, they can decide that I don't like you, I'm not going to go to that church. And that's a very good thing. Because when people come new to our church, once a month we go to a restaurant and it's free. If you just want to get to know the pastor, come. And we don't give them some big talk about the church, we just get to know each other. But there's a whole bunch of people we're not wasting money buying lunch for because they watched online and said, I don't like Ralph Moore. And that's a good thing. So, and by the time that they do get there, they've already decided, I want to be a part of this, and so we're going from there. So, and Facebook makes it really easy because if you're willing to put a little time in the Facebook page, it's all free. So loyalty is natural. There's a family feeling. 1 Timothy chapter 5 says, never speak harshly to an older man, that's me, but appeal to him respectfully as you would to your own father. Talk to younger men as you would to your own brothers. Treat older women as you would your mother, and treat younger women with all purity as your own sisters. There should be a family feeling in church. A whole bunch of the parables, a whole bunch of the teaching in the New Testament relates to family. Stop and think about how much of what we're told in the New Testament, they talk about what went on, and it went on over food. You can't do food very well in a large church. You can do food very well at Fran's house. She has 2 refrigerators in her home. 3. And I've been there. And on Sunday, there's all these international students who are there, and they're part of the church that they're doing. And she's feeding them, and it's an incredibly good thing. And so small churches can do this. Small churches have a feeling of family that large churches, I put can't often. The truth is, they just simply can't duplicate it unless they're very good at small groups. Everyone knows everyone else by name, and they know their history. You know, if somebody comes to us and there's a problem in their life, then we know who to send them to in the church who went through that same problem 7 years ago. You're not going to get that in a large church. The pastor knows the members. In a church the size of ours, like 275 people, I still will walk up to people and go, oh, is this your first Sunday? No, I've been coming here for 4 months. In a large church, you may know only a few people. And I put here, at one time this actually happened to me. Somebody had been in the church for 4 years, and I thought it was their first Sunday. Stupid. Informal atmosphere. Perfection is not the same as excellence. In America, I used to use this slogan about, I'd say, Hope Chapel, a commitment to excellence. And here's what I meant. I followed, you guys call it football, but it's round. So we have this thing called football, and it's got a shape to it, and you throw it like this, right? So there's a football team called the Oakland Raiders, and the Oakland Raiders, they haven't done so well recently. They're starting to do real well again, but at one time they had won more games in relationship to how many games played than any team in professional sports anywhere. And they had this big thing that said a commitment to excellence. And they were the oddballs in what's called the National Football League. They actually had to make a rule because the Raiders would not wash their shirts for the whole football season. So you get caught in a game and there's blood on your shirt, and there's grass stains on your shirt, and your helmet is the same. It's all banged up, beat up, and now you're down there on that line looking at this other guy and looking mean as dirt at him, and you're scary to look at because you're bloody all over, and they know that you're coming after them. And they have this reputation, but what the real reputation was, the guy who owned the team as a young man, played for the team, then became the coach of the team, and then became the owner of the team. And he had a habit of, if you didn't do well in another team, maybe you did super well in college, so that we call it, they drafted you, you were high on the draft, but then you couldn't get along with people. Or you had an alcohol problem, or maybe you had a drugs problem, then he would hire you. And you would sort of know, if I lose this job, I'm out. So you got a lot of motivation to do well, but on top of that, He's always telling you, I believe in you. Nobody believed in you before. You got this little problem with drugs? Well, we'll send you to somebody to help you with that because we believe that you're worth it. And so they had this thing, commitment to excellence. And for them, excellence included people who were considered losers, rejects, wore dirty, filthy uniforms, the whole thing. But they won football games, and they were the terror of the league in those days. All of a sudden, somebody took the word excellence, and I know where it started. It actually started in Hawaii, because I was the one always shouting excellence, and there was a mega church that got growing, and they took over the word excellence, and they wrote a book about it, and now all the big churches are talking about excellence, and they equate this word to this word, and they are two different words. You can have perfection. And by perfection, here's what I mean. You go in, there's a church in another country, not America and not England, that plants churches around the world. And they're a wealthy church. They brag that they spend $1 million planting a church. They actually started one in London. So if you read between the lines, you'll figure out what I'm talking about. But when they start churches, the thing they do before they start is they go around and they check out all the other churches and they hire the best worship leaders from those churches. And so this guy lost his drummer, this person lost their lead guitar person, this person lost whatever, and they pay them money. And now, what are they doing to is that excellence? No. When they get their band together, it's perfection. But is that excellence? That's garbage. That's proselyte. That's stealing. That's chewing the heels off the Church of Jesus Christ in the community. And you know what? I've been to Ukraine, and they did the same thing there. And they can brag, we started this church, and in 10 years we have the largest church in this city. Well, to me, that's junk. That's not perfection. And so, perfection of music, perfection of the lights, perfection of, they would never have the problem that we're having here with this. That's not excellence. That's something else. And so, in a small church, you can achieve excellence very quickly. Because excellence, somebody told me somewhere, I read this, maybe you've read the same thing. It said the most important thing is that you love God with all your heart, and the second most important thing is you love your neighbor. I think that's excellence. And that works better in a small church than in a large church. Most people value authenticity that comes with informality. You know, if I get up here and make jokes about myself and tell stupid things that I've done, you're going to believe what I have to say much more than if I come with and I'm slick. The normal atmosphere generates tolerance for those who are learning to serve. We have a conflict in our church right now. I misunderstood it. Somebody got into leadership and they held an audit for all of our worship leaders. And I think that's good. We want to assess who can do what. So everybody got up and everybody had to, the drummers, the guitar players, whoever, you had to lead everybody else in worship for like 5 minutes. And all it did was it scared a bunch of people because they're not natural worship leaders. And some of them who are were frightened because that they led off with one person who's so good he can play in a nightclub. And so he sets the tone, and everybody else goes, I'm not that good. So they didn't even do as good as they could do. Okay? I understand that, and I go, well, that's an understandable mistake. You shouldn't have done that. Can I just use the word, that was stupid. But I can forgive stupid. Okay? Here's what I found. I found afterwards that they said, we want real talent in our church. And if you don't have talent, we don't want you there. I got a problem now that I got to go home and clean up. I found this out 5 days ago, and I got to go home and go, you are wrong. You are wrong. And here's what they actually said, this is how I heard it. We value talent more than heart. They may have a good heart, but if they don't have talent, we don't want them leading worship in our church. Our church is famous in Hawaii because we like we're into rock and roll music, right? And now, these days, unfortunately, we have a worship leader who's not. I'm happiest that the band sounds like U2. Okay? Bono is one of my heroes. And I like that style of music. I like the driving guitar. I like the, and so now we kind of sing old people music in our church, and that's okay, they can do that. But one of the things that we've always done is if you're learning and you got a heart for it, we just won't turn on your microphone. You're just up there singing your heart out, and nobody can hear you, and your guitar's not plugged in, and you know it. Because you're invited to the party, we want you to be part of this team, we think there's hope for you, and so we're going to put you up there, and until you get better, we're just not going to plug you in, but we want you up there. And the reason is, you have heart. Because we can teach you music, but we can't teach you heart. And so, again, why am I here saying all this? Why did I fly halfway around the planet to tell you this? It's because I think that you're in the sweet spot, and you probably don't know it. Because all the Christian books that you read about being a pastor are saying stuff that's exactly the opposite of what I'm saying. And I'm here to tell you, I pastored 2 churches that both got to 2,200 people. I'm now pastoring a church of 275 people in average attendance. I'm way happier now with what I'm doing than what I was doing then. But I'm happiest of all, I keep talking about it, with what our people did in Kenya. Because that gives me more validation about I'm doing a decent job than any of the other stuff. I put this thing to remind myself to tell the story about the Bulletin Girl. We had a little girl who was, I don't know how you say it, and it's correct politically to say it, but she just wasn't quite the same as everybody else mentally, okay? And whatever words that we used to use are not acceptable words in America, but she just wasn't there. And she would come in every Friday. This was in a church of 1,800 people. And she would come in every Friday morning, and her mother would drive her to the church, and she would fold the church bulletins and put in whatever inserts we had for 1,800 people. That was her ministry. And her mother would bring her in, and she would always have a hamburger and a Coke and French fries from McDonald's. That would be her lunch. Her mom would bring it. We weren't smart. If we were smart, we would have taken her to McDonald's every week. Today, that's what I would do. In those days, I was stupid. Okay, but she did this, and she did it for years. And one time, I'm preaching, and we had built a new building, and so the auditorium was too big. And so to make a big auditorium, our auditorium was shaped like this. But to make it small, we made an octagon. We made 8 sides like this. And in this part of the octagon was where the band was. There's a platform in the middle. And when I preached, it would be like I was like this, like the band's here. And while I'm preaching, I just have to do this every Sunday the whole time to talk to people. And you know what? It was intimate. It was lovely. But get this. You have fun with that camera? Okay, watch this. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you do this around the ring, right? If you rope off these chairs, the back rows of chairs, there's only 3 chairs here. There's 15 back here. If you take 15 times 7 and you rope off 7 rows of 15 chairs, that's over 100 chairs, right? Yeah. So you there wasn't that many people in church, they just roped off 2 rows. Well, it was over half the auditorium. And we did it to waste space because we were in this big thing. So I'm up here doing my little thing, and she's sitting right here. And in the middle of my sermon, I'm talking about faith or something, and she goes, Pastor, can I say something? And I go, yeah, because I'm like that. I like people to feedback. And I go, do you want to come up here and say it? And so she came, so there was a microphone there, and I gave her the microphone, and she goes, would you pray for my cat? My cat's sick. And so we stopped in the middle of the sermon and prayed for her cat. And the next week, she interrupted again to tell us that the cat got better. And that seldom happens in a large church.
Yeah.
It happened in our church because I'm that way. But it seldom happens in a large church. And you know something? I went back there to the 45th anniversary 2 years ago of that church. I left it 12 years in, so I'm going back 27 years after. And somebody told me that story and told me how it changed their life.
Oh, wow.
Good? You can do that every Sunday if you need to.
That's right.
It's harder for me. Okay. We got just a few minutes and we're going to take a break, so I got 12 minutes left. There's a greater awareness of needs. You are missed if you are missing. You know, people miss church and they drop out of sight. In the church the size of mine, I heard that Tom Nakamine wasn't in church. We know that Tom Nakamine has terminal cancer. He's going to die of cancer. He was a leader of Campus Crusade for Christ at the University of Hawaii. There's tons of people that know Jesus because of Tom Nakamine. He's been in our church, and it's an honor that he would go to our church. He's a single man. We've taken trips. We're actually on vacation. We're here to go on a tour with people from our church of England and Ireland and Scotland and Wales. And so I just came in early to do this because I love you people and I promised him I'd come back, and so I'm here. But Tom is always going on these tours. This time he couldn't go on the trip because he's too sick. Well, then a few weeks ago he wasn't in church. And it took about 3 or 4 weeks before I realized that Tom's not there, because he usually helps usher. And suddenly I started realizing he wasn't there. So I prayed for him, right? God help Tom, do whatever. So Sunday he came to church. Actually, he came 2 Sundays ago, and I didn't talk to him. Sunday he came to church, and I bumped into him, and I found out he was in the hospital and almost died. And I never even knew about it. And that's wrong. And if that happened in your church, you would know about it for sure. Now, I'm going to say something that almost sounds cross-purpose to what I just said, but you ought to write this one down. Because you know about it doesn't mean you should go to the hospital and visit him. It means you should be sure that you've equipped somebody else so they go to the hospital and visit him. See, I was once in a situation where our church did a really wonderful job. Some people had some financial problems and they were forced to move, and some people in the church helped them financially and went and helped them move, and afterwards they were mad because I didn't do it, and they said, we had all this problem, we had to move, da-da-da-da-da, these people helped us, but the church did nothing. And I go, no, the church did everything. I did my job. I equipped them. They did what they did to you. That's the difference. My job is to equip. Their job is to do. And that comes straight out of Ephesians chapter 4, where it says apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers are there to equip the saints to do the work of ministry. But the deal is this: if you're pastoring less than 50 people, you're the orchestra conductor, and you're in a real good condition to go, hey, you need to go and see that person and get this done. Okay, everybody soon knows if you have a problem. I get really upset with pastors who whine all the time about gossip. The guy who pastors one of the churches I used to pastor, he's forever, if somebody tells about something, and they may be telling an honest to goodness prayer request, and he's mad because you're gossiping. It's like, shut up. People need to know if something's wrong, and they need to, but they need to be taught to respond to it and in love and do the right thing. People are more willing to help rather than let the church do it because they understand they are the church in a small church. And that just happens naturally. You don't even have to hardly teach for that to happen. Smaller churches can function anywhere. Most larger churches in America are located in the suburbs. Here's a new term for you. Maybe you know this word, maybe you don't. Exurbs. E-X-H-U-R-B-S. Here's what exurbs are. It's where the suburbs meet the cows. Okay? I used to live in a place like that, where the suburbs met the cows. I lived in a suburban neighborhood, but I could get on my bicycle and go see cows any day that I wanted to. That's where you can buy 50 acres of ground real cheap, because you bought somebody's farm, you build a church. And so in America, what we call mega churches, and now today they call a mega church 2,000 or more people. There's one mega church in Houston, Texas that actually bought a basketball arena, and they have 40,000 people. They're in the inner city, which is surprising, because most mega churches are in the exurbs. The suburbs are too expensive, the inner city's too expensive, it's too far out in the country, so you go right where the suburbs meet the cows, and guess what? Almost all mega churches in America are either white people or they're black people. They're very seldom Asian people, and they're very seldom Hispanic people. They're black people or they're white people. Both of them. You know what you don't know, and I'm not just saying that because I see a bunch of people from Africa descent in this room, but the largest Protestant denomination in the United States is called the Pentecostal Church of God in Christ. And it's a black denomination. And you don't read about it in the books. The books are lily white. But these people are doing a far better job. And in those things that say that 23% of all Americans can say they went to church the last 7 days, if you go to black Americans, it's over 30%. So who's doing a better job? And so if we're going to do churches that aren't in the exurbs or the suburbs, see, as soon as the builders get caught up, the exurbs become the suburbs, right? You bought the cow pasture, you built a church. This happened to Rick Warren. He bought way out in the Tules, and he bought the land for real cheap. And now he sold off a whole bunch of land to a financial center. The church made millions off of doing this. But who's going to start the church in the place where it's downtown? There's no parking. It's expensive rent. All these things are against you. A small church can thrive in that kind of situation. It's never going to happen in a big church. So smaller churches work well in a crowded urban environment. We moved from the exurbs, because that's what we did. We were at a public school for 16 years, and then we bought land out in the country, and they built stuff around it right while we were there. And we moved into a movie theater in the heart of Honolulu. And what we found out was we're so used to having our home groups are called mini church. And we always have over half our people in mini churches. But what we found is and we call them home groups, right? More than half of our home groups don't meet in homes. They meet in parks, they meet in conference rooms where people work, but most of them meet in either Starbucks or McDonald's or in the food court of a shopping mall. One shopping mall has 5 of our mini church meeting in a shopping mall because they have these little tables and places that you can get food. And so we looked at that, and I went in with a real wrong attitude. You know, you lost your place to meet. Well, everybody in your group's got an apartment. Just meet in somebody else's apartment, but you can't park cars there. And that's a minor problem. But because you can't park cars there, you can't have mini church there. So the places you can park cars is at the shopping mall. So they went there. So I'm learning that I have to learn, you know, and so it's different. Small churches can work well in a rural environment. You get way out in the country. We started a church in a town. Who's ever heard of Lewiston, Idaho?
People from Idaho should.
Okay. How many people live in Lewiston, Idaho? Yes.
About, I don't know, 20,000?
20,000 people, okay? We'll just go with that, okay? 20,000 people live in Lewiston, Idaho. We sent Jeff Chavez there about 7 years ago to start a church. God just blessed. Somebody pretty much gave him a storefront to start church in. Within 1 year, there's 120 people going to that church. Is that cool?
Wow.
Okay, here's what's better. There were people from 2 little towns that I don't even know the name of, driving to that church 30 miles each way. And in Idaho, they get something called snow, right? And so in the winter, it became hard for them to come to church. So Jeff just decided, he did what we do. He discipled them, and they started house churches in the country, in the snow, in Idaho. And then we got in trouble with the denomination because the denomination said they're not real pastors. And so we said, tough luck. Smaller churches function well when there is opposition to the gospel. I'm going to end with this, and we're going to go to some different notes when we come back. I'm going to retire from being a pastor on November the 12th. On November the 13th, I turned 72. And I'm going to still do this stuff with Exponential. But I'm moving to San Diego, California, which is like 8 million people or something. I know 4 people. I know my daughter, I know my son-in-law, I know my realtor, and I know a friend of my daughter's who was a pastor, an assistant pastor in a big church. And the guy's wife left him for another man in the church. And so he's really broken. And so he's living in our house. We bought the house already. He's living in it because I can't move until January. And so that's the only people I know in all of San Diego. My realtor is a gay man. And he's a gay man, he's my age. And people my age that are gay don't go around, wearing rings in the wrong ear or, flaunting that they're gay. They kind of hide it, but you can tell, right? The gay people call it gaydar. Radar? Gaydar? Well, I have pretty good gaydar. So I can spot. And so the guy's a really nice guy. And in America, the church has almost made a profession of hating gays. It happened over gay marriage. And we went through this thing twice in Hawaii. We finally ended up with gay marriage. But the first time there was this big church just arrayed itself against gay people. And some guy who's an ex-alcoholic got saved in our church and delivered from alcohol. He got a prophecy that I was supposed to be the person to lead the movement against gay marriage in Hawaii. Well, we've had so many homosexuals get saved and get delivered from being homosexual that at one time there was one woman and 5 men who came to us as she was a lesbian, they were homosexual men, and there were all 6 of them were heterosexually married and had children. And they found the Lord in a church that will never ever say anything against gay people. In fact, if you read Romans chapter 1, and it says God gave them over to a depraved mind, it's not talking about gay people. It's talking about all these people who hate their parents and who tell lies and do all that, and gay people are among them. They're called sinners. Okay? And God gives sinners over to a depraved mind because the reason isn't because of what they do. If you read Romans 1, it's because they see evidence of God and they deny that He exists. That's sin. All the other stuff is a symptom of the sickness. The sickness is sin. So when I teach that, I do not single out gay people. I mention it, but to me, I got people in my church that are not married that are sleeping together, and nobody in America preaches against that anymore, but they preach against gays. So I get hooked up with this guy. He loves my daughter. And my wife was sick. She had a heart attack, and she found the house that we bought on the internet. And so I communicated back and forth with this realtor, and I went up, and my daughter and the realtor and I went around and looked at these houses, and my daughter basically picked out the house my wife picked. So that's the house we got. But I meet this guy, Tom. He's a super nice man. And it turns out he's a Catholic. I don't know if he goes to church or not, but in his heart, he's a Catholic. And so I start dropping little hints about, you know, I'm a pastor, I get so frustrated with some things in the church, and I start talking about church. I did this on purpose, talking about church politics. Then I start talking about the anti-gay thing, about, you know, the church, fine if you don't believe in gay marriage, but don't hate gay people. Because Jesus died for gay people as much as he died for me. And so I just throw out little hints. Then one thing he's interested in is Islam, and how come Muslims are becoming Christians, and there's a lot more of that in the world than you know. Write this down: A Wind in the House of Islam. That book. It's a book. A Wind in the House of Islam. It's on Amazon, and you'll find that Jesus is appearing to Muslims. I've met two of them, where they met Jesus in a vision, and he converted them. They think that the perfection churches in the West are decadent, and so they won't call themselves Christians. They call themselves Muslims who are followers of Isa. Isa is the word for Jesus. In the 1970s, some Saudi king, did you know this? It's okay if I tell this? Because it's going to break a couple minutes late, right? But, and you remember what I was talking about? Opposition to the gospel. I'm getting ready to tell you that. Okay, so here's what happened. Is it the King James Bible? You know what I'm talking about? It was translated in England in 1615, right? And what happened was, if you know the history, Henry VIII wanted to have a divorce, and the Catholic Church wouldn't let him, so he decided to become a Protestant. And then the guy who followed him wanted to make everybody happy, so he got the Bible published in English, because before it was always in Latin. And so that's how we got the King James Version, and it's a very good translation of the Bible. It's very accurate, but the problem is, it's written in Shakespearean English, and we don't talk that way anymore. So that's why we use more modern translations. The Quran, I don't know if you know this, but Muhammad was a Christian. And he was a heretic. He had stupid ideas, and that they threw him out of church. And so he goes out in the desert, and he has his dreams and visions, and he comes back with this idiot book. It's in 1600 AD, 600 AD. So, what is that, 900 years, no, 1,000 years before the King James. So we have a hard time reading King James English. Arabs can't read the Quran in the original language. Modern Arabs cannot read the book. And if you're in Indonesia, you don't even speak Arabic, so you can't read any of it. So the only people who can read it are the imams, the priests. And there's actually people, there's a name for them, there's a lot of them in the world, who've memorized the whole Quran. I mean, could you imagine memorizing the Bible, the whole thing? I memorized the Gospel of Matthew once, and it took me a year and a half, but I actually could quote the whole Gospel of Matthew. But there's guys that can quote the whole Quran, but they don't have any idea what it is that they're saying when they say the words. It's that bad. So this Saudi rich guy, this king, gets the Quran translated into every language on earth that Muslims speak. And so modern Arabs can now read it. Modern Indonesians can now read it. The Uyghurs in China can now read the Quran. And here's what's happening. This book, Wind in the House of Islam, is really, really cool. The single most important tool for evangelism in the Muslim world is the Quran that they can finally read. Because when they read in there that you're only allowed to have 4 wives, and Muhammad had 20, they start to have their doubts. And then when they read that his one wife, the youngest, he married her when she was 6 years old, but didn't have sex with her until she was 9. This is real.
Yeah.
You know what happens when you have sex with a 9-year-old girl? You rip her insides apart. And so they're going, that guy can't be the prophet. He must not be the prophet. And actually, here's two things about that Muhammad did right. The one is he wrote more about Jesus than he did himself. And the second is this. He said, if you have questions about the Quran, go to the older books, which were the Old Testament and the New Testament. And so the tool that God is using to convert Muslims to Jesus is the Quran. But by and large, they look at the American church and go, you're decadent. And so they won't call themselves, which is a good thing. Because as soon as they call themselves Christians, they get their throat cut, right? But they're Muslims who follow Isa. And what's happening in some countries, there are hundreds of imams who are now becoming followers of Isa. And that's a good thing. Is that? Yeah. That's free, that's not part of the talk. But okay, I'm going to end with this. Okay, I took you longer than I wanted, but smaller churches function well when there is opposition to the gospel. So here's what I'm going to talk more about this in the next session, about how to do this kind of thing. I'm going to retire from being a pastor, but my friend Tom Kowalski, in his words, when he was a dope smoking hippie, invited the Catholic Church to hold Mass in his apartment for him and all of his hippie friends. Now he's 71 years old, so he's talking like 50 years ago. And there was a young priest that they promised to send who was kind of hip and cool and could relate to these people. They sent this old guy, and the priests have uniforms called vestments, and they wear little sashes and stuff. In the one service, he changed clothes 3 times. And you got a bunch of hippies sitting around, and they're going, enough of this. And that was the end of that. So I got Tom reading, he read Wind in the House of Islam. I wrote a book about our churches called Let Go of the Ring, and it's about when we were all, our whole church was dope smoking hippies, and what God did there, he read that. And so what we're sort of angling for, and we're going to breakfast 2 weeks from today, we're going to breakfast. He's in love with my daughter and in love with my wife, and he's gay. Right? And so he makes no move towards me, but he sure loves her. And we're going out to breakfast, and I'm working my way in to starting a church in his house.
Wow.
But here's what we're going to do: is we're going to assign scripture. No, it'll be no sermons. You read whatever we're reading. John chapter 15 this week, because it was John 14 last week. You got to promise you'll read it 5 times, and if you don't read it 5 times, you can't talk for the first 20 minutes. Because we want you to be penalized, but we also don't want you to take the discussion down the wrong road. After you hear everybody else talk, then you can talk. And there will be no sermon, and all opinions are welcome, and if you hate God, come and tell us why. And that's going to be church. We're going to have food, and we're going to have the Bible, and as the pastor, all I'm going to do is lead these people, and I'm going to let them lead each other to Jesus. And I know that they'll do it. Okay? So, smaller churches function well when there's opposition to the gospel, because you can say something that is really hateful, and I can smile at you and say, well, let's talk about that. And you cannot do that if there's 5,000 people seeing there. You had your hand up.
Really not preparing. You're not going to return anyway. You're going to do some after you return your pastor.
Well,
you're going to be.
What's that?
You say you're going to be retiring your pastor.
You're retired.
Well, I'm not really retiring. That's not the Bible. But here's my problem. My very real problem right now is
It's the fatal floor in your
and I'm quitting with this. My church wants me to be their missionary to America. That's what they're calling it. So they want me to carry a card that I'm a pastor. The group Exponential, they'll pay a church money, and that church will pay me, and then I can, in America, you can take your housing as a tax deduction. So that's worth money to me. But I really don't want to be an ordained pastor anymore, because I want to be able to look at a gay person and say, no, I can't do your wedding because I don't do weddings. But now, so here's what I'm going to say, is I decided not to do weddings anymore because I knew somebody like you would ask that question, and I don't want to get into conflict with other Christians, so I'm not going to marry heterosexual people, and I'm not going to marry homosexual people, and you know what? Do what you're going to do, because you and God have to deal with that. I'm not in it. I'm just here to love you, and that I think that's an under-evangelized people group in America. In the book that I'm writing, and it's not in my notes, there are 584 people groups in America who have not yet been told the gospel.
Wow.
A people group may be a group of Iraqis who have moved to America and have not been told the gospel. But there's 584 of them. The third largest mission field in the world is called the United States of America. Pray for our country. Time for